one of my professors was always like asking me why something was there. Like, so why is this here? Like, what's it doing? What's the point of this? And it makes me think about like, because I work pretty simply, I'm mindful of every line. I'm like, what is this expressing? Like, what is this doing for the illustration? So I think it makes me more mindful of like everything that I make. So like everything serves a purpose.
When I started this podcast, I had intended to do many more interviews with creative people that I admire, but I've basically been hogging the mic most of the time. So if you're as sick of my voice as I am, well, you're in for a treat. My guest today is someone who has inspired me with his playful approach to illustration and content creation. He's done work for everyone from the Washington Post to Nickelodeon and Red Bull. Chris Piascik, welcome to Keep the Flow.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to start off by saying the thing that really stands out about you to me is that you have this ability not just to draw cool stuff, but to explain things in a way that I think is really special. You have a certain humility. It never feels like you're lecturing. It feels more like you're a friend who's showing you how to do something that they just figured out themselves 20 minutes ago. So I'm wondering, do you consider yourself an educator?
I mean, sorry, excuse my voice a little bit. I'm got a little bit of a cold,
No
but
problem.
I mean, I guess I do have some teaching experience. For quite a few years, I was an adjunct professor teaching like a class or two a semester throughout most of my career. But I stopped that maybe like 4 years ago, just because it was, it takes up a lot of time, even if you're just teaching one class by the time you get to the school, and then you got to, projects and grading them. And it was a lot. And, teaching undergrad students, sometimes you have a mix of like some students who are really into it. And I love working with those kind of people. But when there's students who are just like have to take it for a credit or don't really care, I'm not, I don't, I'm not interested in like forcing someone to try to learn something. Like if they don't want to do it, I'm just like, whatever, I don't care. So, that's not ideal if you're really trying to help all the students. I do still teach one class, but it's a very sort of unique situation because um, it's in a low residency MFA and illustration program, meaning that the students only meet 3 times a year, and my class is just 1 week in the summer. So it's just Monday through Friday, like all day. So it's just like an intensive week, but then, so I can cram it all in 1 week and then I'm done for the rest of the year. So it's sort of perfect for my schedule. So I, I do teach. I don't necessarily think of myself as an educator, but I
Well,
guess.
you're good at it. I mean, I also teach.
Well,
I,
thank
I
you.
teach drums 3 days a week. But as far as like when you're doing a tutorial, like I said, you have a certain humility about what you do. And I was wondering because sometimes you're showing your process as you're drawing, and you're talking about what's going on in your head. Is that weird?
No, it sort of just feels. I've never really thought about it. It just sort of feels natural. Like I'm trying to like explain what I'm doing or why I'm doing something. I think maybe it comes down to I feel very strongly about the idea that illustration is very different than regular art because you're trying to communicate something, or you're not just trying to like render something as tight as possible and make it look super realistic or copy something the best you can.
Mm.
Illustration is like art that's has a job to do. Like it's communicating something, it's telling a story. And because my work is so simplified and stylized, I kind of talk about how I feel like the decisions are easier to talk about because there's less of them, because I'm like focusing on key areas. Um,
But it seems like you're thinking out loud, but it's easy to follow.
Yeah, I don't it's funny because as someone with ADHD, I feel like I'm very scattered, but when I'm drawing, I don't really feel that way, and I think maybe it's just from like, I've drawn so much. Like, I did a daily drawing project for 14 years, so I
Wow,
think
14 years.
drawing so drawing so much, it feels, like, intuitive, and I can just sort of, like, talk about what I'm doing and just focus on that, uh, but I never really thought about that that being different or unique about me. So it's interesting to hear.
Well, I think for a lot of artists and creative people, it's an internal process. It's going on inside your head, and you're oftentimes just alone. You're by yourself, and there's no need to narrate what you're doing. But with you, it just seems very natural. Like you just sort of are
Yeah.
bringing the audience into to all the stuff that's going on in your head. It's that's a fun place. Your head, apparently.
E Sometimes. I think it also has to do with me always wanting to, like, incorporate a little bit of humor or fun things in there, so I'm, like, constantly thinking about I, like, train my brain to, like, think about what I'm doing and, like, how I can change it or update it, and also being, like, mindful of how I'm drawing something and, like, trying to communicate expression or, like, you know, the mood of a character or, like, I don't know, just like a silly face, so I'm, like, really thinking about what I'm doing, so I'm just sort of, like, saying out loud what I'm thinking about, and I don't know, I feel like maybe it's like an ADHD thing where your mind is, like, racing all the time, so I'm just sort of just pulling in the things that my 'cause I'm drawing something and my mind is like, "Oh, what if, it's, the cloud is angry because he's shooting out lightning," or you know what I mean? So it's like I'm just sort of like hearing these things my brain is giving me and then being like, "Oh, and then I could do this," and just trying to say it in a less, crazy way than my brain presents it.
So you mentioned you did some teaching, but you also went to school for design yourself. You didn't study illustration per se in college. Is that right?
So, yeah, I did, my undergrad in graphic design, and then later down the road into my illustration career, I actually did get my master's in illustration, mainly, like, it's so bizarre to think about because I sort of had this, like, feeling that everything like, it was too good to be true that I was an illustrator. I was like, "How am I making a living like this? I don't know what I'm doing," and I had just had this, like, imposter syndrome, and the school I was teaching at the time had this low residency MFA in illustration program, the one that I teach in right now, and because I was teaching there, I got a discount on the program, and because it wasn't full time, I could not just, like, stop my career. I could just do it alongside while I'm working and not have to take out more student loans because I could just pay for it that way. So, I did do the program, but, I, like, went into the program feeling like I was a fake illustrator while paying for the program with, like, illustration income from, like, a McDonald's project. So, it's like
So you
I don't
already
know. It
had
seems so silly
you had
now.
already done the McDonald's at that point.
Yeah, that was the thing that, like, pushed it over. I'm like, "Okay, maybe I
Wow.
should do this." And then, like, I got this McDonald's project, and I'm like, "Oh, this is a big paycheck. This will cover pretty much all of the first, 2 years." It was like, 75% of the tuition. So I was like, "Alright, I'll just do it. Why not?"
Wow.
I was like, "And even if this falls through, I'll have my master's degree, so when my career just someone finds out that I'm an illustrator and I can't be doing this for real and they make me get a real job, I could just be like a regular full-time professor or something."
I think that's a really common thing, though. I mean, I hear a lot of not just illustrators, but I mean, in every creative profession, there's this feeling, this imposter syndrome, this feeling like eventually they'll find out that I'm not supposed to be here,
Yeah.
and
Well, also, not even just that, just that it's too good to be true. Like, when I was a kid, both my parents worked at the post office. My mom had, like, 2 jobs. She worked at, like, the grocery store after working at the post office all the time, and I'm like and then, like, a career day when you're little, it's like, "Oh, a fireman, a cop, a doctor," and, like, they all sounded so terrible to me. And I'm like, I just hang out at home and draw pictures. Like, how is this allowed?
Right. Yeah. But you also, because you went to school for design first and then got into illustration, do you feel like having this design, and then you also worked as a designer, I think. Is that right?
I did, yeah, yeah. That was like my whole goal from like a child growing up. That like I wanted to be a graphic designer, and yeah, I worked as a designer for like 5 years.
And then you decided, no, actually I just want to draw pictures. I just want to sit in my room and draw pictures.
No, I mean, not necessarily. It didn't even occur to me that that was an option. So I the f- right out of school, I got a job at a design studio, and it was doing a lot of kind of boring corporate stuff, and I didn't love it, but I ended up getting a job offer at the studio that did a lot of stuff for the music industry, which is like the whole reason I got into um, wanted to be a graphic designer. I used to like redraw the album packaging around my house,
Okay.
and I think some like my uncle or something was like, "Oh, you'll be a graphic artist one day," and I was like, "What is that?" And then when I found out it was a job, I was like, "That's the only option for me. Like, why would I do anything else?" So I got this job, and it was great, and I probably would have stayed there for a very long time. It was a very small studio. There's just like five of us. We were all friends, but this was like 2000. So I started working there in like 2006, and then the economy just went to shit in 2009. And just like one of our biggest clients went away, and it just sort of they had to pretty much shut down except for two people. So at that point, I had been doing a daily drawing project for 2 years, and I was starting to get random commissions for illustration work based on those drawings. And it had been happening for about a year, and it just seemed like a coincidence every single time. But I was like, oh, this is actually picking up a little bit. And I really don't want to get another design job because it's going to feel terrible compared to this one because I don't want to do the last one. So I was like, maybe I can make it work. And um, I ended up getting like a project doing some shirts for Nike, and that like sort of covered rent for a few months. So I was like, all right, I'm going to really give this a go. And 16 years later, I'm still doing it.
Do you feel like that having the background in graphic design though influences the way that you approach illustration?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't change what I did. I think going to school for graphic design was the better choice for me. I think designers make really good illustrators. A lot of my favorite illustrators have backgrounds in design. A good design program will really make you focus on, you know, solving a visual problem and composition and layout, as opposed to like, a lot of illustration programs are just like a lot of life drawing and like just trying to render something as accurately as possible, and like that's not helpful. Like it's helpful to like learn drawing skills, but like that's only one aspect of illustration. Like if you can render something as well as possible, but it doesn't communicate it or anything, or doesn't tell you anything, it's not an illustration. And that kind of thing is like the first thing that AI will be able to take over. Like just drawing something really well is not that unique. Anyone can learn how to do that if they spend enough time. And uh, a robot can do it immediately.
Yeah. But it's funny, like I heard I think it was Andy J Pizza that were talking about earlier said illustration is storytelling with pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it. I mean, my grandfather actually worked for the local paper in Virginia as the chief illustrator, and that
Oh,
was
cool.
like when there was just like everything was hand drawn. You know, everything you saw in the paper,
Hmm.
every advertisement. You know, I have a lot of respect for that profession. It seemed like a real job. You know, the whole time I was
Yeah.
growing up, it was like it didn't seem strange to me that
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
he would put on a coat and tie and go to work every day, and
Sure.
so that was a job. One of your tutorials that I saw was how to animate an illustration using Adobe Fresco. And I was just wondering, I see that on in a lot of your videos you animate some of your characters. And have you thought about getting more into animation? Have you thought about like I saw that you also did some work for the Cartoon Network at some point. Have you thought about
Yeah, I
actually
work.
getting
Yeah.
into cartoons?
Uh, Not necessarily. I don't. Animation is kind of tedious, and I don't. I I like to make things move and like I like making moving images, but like a full. There's so much tedious work involved with like full on cartoon and like writing the story and all that stuff, and that's not my strength. And um, yeah, I don't have the patience to like animate a full thing, but I like adding movement to an otherwise still illustration. And it's a very specific, unique skill to like do full on animation really well,
Mm.
and it's just takes a lot of work and so many aspects. Um, I also think that I illustrate like a designer, where I'm not really drawing like scenes or like things interacting with other things. I sort of draw graphically and like I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I draw too many things that are just sort of like floating in space, but yeah, I just think it's not necessarily that not something that wouldn't be that fun for me or that I'd be that good at. The project for Cartoon Network was really it was Cartoon Network was definitely like a dream client. But it was something that was unique to my skill set, and it was sort of doing what I'm talking about. It was for a new show trailer that they were putting out, like a commercial, and they had like edited all the clips together, but they needed me to create like transitions for the different shows and like add little elements on top of the clips. Like I do some like lettering on top of it, or just like fun transitions blending two different shows. So like that style sort of carried through the whole commercial to make it feel cohesive, even though it was like all the different shows.
Okay.
And also like a lot of the motion that I do is in Fresco, and Fresco motion is super easy to use. However, it is set up for like looping continuous motion. Like there's not an actual video timeline. Every layer gets its own timeline. So it's very intuitive and easy to make things that loop and just continue on forever. But you wouldn't use it to make like a full on animation. You would need something that was more, you know, video timeline based.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, how I stumbled upon you, found you, was on YouTube, obviously, through some sort of tutorial, and probably was looking for something because I use Illustrator a lot, and I was probably looking up how to do. I look at a lot of tutorials, and I mean, I was trying to find how to do something in Illustrator, and of course, YouTube is the first place I go to. You had done something in Fresco, and then had were taking it into Illustrator, and
Oh
that
yeah,
was like a major light bulb moment for me because
yeah.
I mean, first of all, I'm left-handed, so I avoid having to use a pen, right? But my
Mhm.
daughter happened to have an Apple Pencil, and then I decided to give this Fresco thing a shot, and was amazed at how easy it was to get things and the seamlessness of Adobe Fresco
Mm.
and Illustrator. But I started to realize that whenever you would search for anything with Adobe Fresco, you come up. You're like the brand ambassador or something for Adobe Fresco. And I don't think I've ever seen you on YouTube drawing with an actual physical piece of paper. What's up with that?
So when early on in my career, for the first, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years, maybe more than that. I have a bad concept of time. I did. all of my line work on paper and then scanned it in and colored it in Photoshop. Uh, but it's just not convenient to use paper. It's just everything about working digitally is so much easier and faster. I don't have to get stuff. I don't have to set up. I don't have to worry how the ink is doing in my pen. It's just everything is perfect all the time. And I can undo if I mess something up. It's just so much easier. And I don't have to deal with stacks of paper everywhere. I don't have to scan. It just takes so many steps out of the process. And I don't know. I just I don't have any interest because I feel like the digital drawing tools have gotten so good that they just like the pens that the brushes that I use like perfectly mimic the ones that I used to draw with that, you know, they're even better. So it's like I have no desire to draw on paper.
Right. Wow.
Not that I still do it. Like if I'm hanging out with my kid, I'll like be doodling with him while he's coloring. But like,
I just got a pair of this has nothing to do with anything, but I just got a pair of nylon brushes, like for the drums, you know, to play on the drums with. I've always
uh-huh.
used there's like the original brushes are metal. I can imagine like if you're used to drawing with like pen and paper, and then you go over to an iPad, there has to be like some sort of adjustment.
Yeah, it didn't work for me until I started using a like a matte screen protector that feels like paper. That was crucial. Now I don't use one because I have the iPad with a nano texture and it does it feels perfect. It
Okay.
feels like when I was doing like client work or something that I wanted to be extra good, I would draw on this marker paper that was a little bit smoother and like held the ink better, and that reminds me of the nano texture iPad screen.
Wow. So the technology is just completely it's gonna save all the trees, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I used to go through a lot of paper, uh, and I would like be in the situation where I felt like I needed to like hold on to it for a period, and then ended up just like dumping tons of it at one point.
Yeah. Can imagine. It builds up. I know just from having kids, you know, it's like they come
Yeah,
stuff. It's like where are we gonna put it? I actually have a couple of like portfolios here we got for the kids, and they're just like completely overstuffed and exploding, and
yeah,
it takes up a lot of room. So
that's for sure.
I wonder like how it seems like you've been doing YouTube videos for a long time. How did you get started
Not
with
really.
that? Oh, really?
uh, so it's a little over 2 years. Yeah, so I started because I was trying to like transition my career a little bit to sort of make more time for just like making stuff that I wanted to make and not take on as much client work, especially because I had just had my kid at the time, and that was a real like kind of shock for my schedule because you know, I had spent so much time just doing whatever I wanted whenever I wanted, and I didn't realize how unstructured my work schedule was, and having to like fit it into like a finite amount of time felt so hard for me. It still feels impossible. Like I feel like I'm constantly battling time. So I was like thinking about the different ways that I have income coming in and like what I could do to bolster that. And one of the areas that had been doing decent for me was I had done a few classes on Skillshare, and I had become one of their top teachers, and it was like, and I felt like I wasn't putting that much time into it. I was just doing like a class a year or something, but it was still like earning me monthly income. And I was like, well, if I just like kind of focus on this a little bit more, maybe this could, you know, boost things up enough to buy me some more time. So I was looking at the other top teachers and the ones who were most successful, and I saw that a lot of them had YouTube channels. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. You could make videos that talk about something that's in one of your Skillshare videos and then push people over there. So that was my whole goal, was just to do YouTube to drive Skillshare class, like people to my Skillshare classes. and then it sort of took off faster than I would have anticipated. So I never started a YouTube channel thinking that like I was going to be doing YouTube as like a serious part of my career. It was just sort of to supplement or promote my Skillshare.
I noticed like in your, I think it's your most recent video that you are giving advice for illustrators, or I don't know if it's just for illustrators or creative people, but there's something that you said in there that really stood out to me, that was, don't try to do work to get hired. Just keep doing, like you were talking about doing your daily drawing. You said it for 14 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Every day?
So I was doing them Monday through Friday.
Okay. Well, that's enough, I think. But because I think that that's something that can be applicable not just to illustrators but to all creative people. The idea of um, of not trying to be a certain thing, instead just be yourself and just do what you do and just put it out all the time and let it evolve. I really I really resonated with that. Um, and I was just wondering if you have any other advice that maybe is, for creative people, people that are either getting started out or just anybody who's engaged in a creative pursuit.
Well, I mean, I think that that point is important for a ton of reasons. When you are an illustrator or some other sort of like freelance creative and you're trying to get hired for your work, you want to do something that stands out from the rest. You want something that's unique. And if you're just making stuff that you think is going to get you hired, your reference point is the stuff that's already been commissioned or like other work that's out there. So it's like, how can you make something unique and different if you're trying to emulate what's already, you know, getting you're already seeing out there? Like you want to do something different. The other thing is, if you're working on making stuff about things you like, there's endless benefits to that. One, you're going to have more fun doing it. Two, you're going to have like a broader knowledge base about that thing. You're going to know all these interesting little quirks or things, little things that you can sort of put into that illustration that's going to make it resonate more with people who share the same interests. And it also will give you a broader reach because it's not just about the creative work you're doing. The people who may not even be necessarily looking for creative work may just find it because they're interested in the same thing that you're interested in. And, there's been multiple times throughout my career that has led to work because people found it not because they were looking for a creative to hire, but because it was something that they were also interested in and they saw the work in that context. And then they had this, you know, deeper connection with it because they found it because they liked it and it resonated with them. And it just so happened that they also were in a position to hire someone to do some work. Uh, the most recent example was the Hot Wheels project that I did, where I designed packaging for a limited edition set of Hot Wheels cars. I've always been
Those look
into
so cool,
cars,
by
and
the way. I love
oh,
that.
thank you so much. Yeah, and like I just, part of the daily drawing project was one of the hard things. Well, the hardest thing was just coming up with ideas all the time. So I ended up doing lots of series because they would give me multiple ideas in a row. And the first one I did was like drawing every bike that I've ever had because I was really into bikes for a good part of my life. And after I did that, I was like thinking of other things that I was really into that there was a lot of. And I've always been into cars and like specifically like kind of older, quirky, small cars. And, I like to do like autocross and track days and stuff like that. So I just love cars, so I did a drawing, all these little drawings of like cars with like lettering around them, like things about the cars. And like that's a good example of like when you're really into something, you can put in those kind of extra details, things about the car or like reasons why it's cool or, you know, just little things like that. And all those little details resonated with someone who was into cars and also worked at Hot Wheels and was like, oh, I love these. Hopefully I would love to figure out a way to work with you at some point. But, most of the Hot Wheels all look the same with their packaging. But it just so happened a couple of years later that they were doing these limited edition ones that were like exaggerated features and stuff like that and looked sort of like my illustrations. And he was like, we need to do special packaging for these. Would you like to do it? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah. Pretty nice gig.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's another one from the bonus round. Let me see. So, what is something that, like a piece of advice that someone told you that had an impact on your life?
I mean, the biggest one was finding out that it's a job to create things, like to illustrate and design. That was the craziest thing I ever heard. I was like, what? No one even talks about this. I was like, did you tell my mom? Because she's sorting mail at the post office and then bagging groceries. She could just be at home making logos and album artwork.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big one. I think also one thing that I always think about when I'm making things is back to like design school. Um, One of my professors was always like asking me why something was there. Like, so why is this here? Like, what's it doing? What's the point of this? And it makes me think about like, because I work pretty simply, I'm mindful of every line. I'm like, what is this expressing? Like, what is this doing for the illustration? So I think it makes me more mindful of like everything that I make. So like everything serves a purpose.
If you had to start over completely in with your career, not to do something different, but if you had to start over, what would you do differently?
It's wild. I honestly don't think I would do anything differently because everything has sort of not only just worked out well, but like going to school for design gave me so many skills that are so important for my work as an illustrator. Not only just the illustration stuff, but like being able to use design to like put things together, to like, the books that I've done of my work, like promo stuff, like uh even just like the simple stuff, branding stuff, like a lot of like you can be a great illustrator, and if you present it in a way that looks like garbage, it's going to make you look like amateur. Not it just looks. It's so easy for bad design to make good illustration look terrible. Um, and just that sort of design thinking is something that plays such a huge role in the way that I illustrate, and also my experience like working at design studios and like working with clients. It was like sort of like a really good introduction to doing that without like with the support of the rest of the studio. So it was like an easy way to do it. And then just like kind of getting to work, know what it's like to work in a studio for multiple years and then moving on to do my own thing. Honestly, I don't think I would change much of it at all. Like, I don't know, maybe I would have focused a little bit more on some of the figure drawing classes in undergrad, but
All
who
right. Well,
knows?
let me rephrase it. So, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give them?
Sure. Uh, I think one there's lots of like little things like starting off as a freelancer, and a lot of it was like I would like be worried about pricing projects, and well, I think I lost more projects from pricing too low than I ever did for pricing too high, because when you price too low, uh, whoever's hiring you may, especially if it's like a bigger brand, they think that you're just like maybe a student or not a professional, you're not serious, and for them, these like budgets are minuscule compared to everything else that they're doing. So it's like they're not trying to like save a few dollars, especially if they think that they're gonna have to do a lot of babysitting or you're gonna deliver work that's not gonna turn out, because like they have to answer to someone else too. So it's like, um, you know, be confident in your work, and also like remember, if someone's hiring you to do something, they came to you because they like your work, and they want that. So it's like you have this unique skill that they specifically came to you for. So why would you be scared to like price it in a way that makes sense? And also, uh, you know, be more. You can be more confident when you're meeting with these people because like they're a bunch of business people, and you're the cool artist.
Great. That's great advice. Yeah. Well, man, this has been really cool, really nice talking to you, and thanks a lot for doing
Well,
this.
thank you.
It was great.
Yeah, of course. It was fun.
If you enjoyed this interview, you would definitely like the one I did with printmaker Pat Rosario, which you can click on here. Or if you would like to get even more of my talk with Chris and more of Keep the Flow in general, head over to my Patreon page where you can follow me for free, or for as little as $1 a month, you can get all sorts of perks. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, keep the flow.